The fluorescent lights of Sunshine Bakery cast a harsh glow across Robert Thorne's weathered face. His calloused fingers gripped his phone tightly, knuckles white with tension. The pink and purple princess cake behind the glass display case seemed to mock him, with its elaborate fondant turrets in delicate sugar flowers. Exactly what Sophie had drawn in her sketchbook for weeks using the broken crayons they'd salvaged from restaurant kids' meals. Exactly what he couldn't afford. "I'm sorry, sir," the teenage cashier's voice held practiced politeness that couldn't mask her impatience. "Store policy requires full payment up front for custom orders." The price tag read $6,500. Robert's wallet contained exactly $27.50, all that remained then after the electric bill and groceries. 6 months ago, before the layoffs at Midwest Mechanical, a $65 cake wouldn't have required a second thought. Behind him, a line of customers shifted restlessly, checking phones and sighing audibly. Heat crawled up Robert's neck as he dialed Sophie's number, his voice dropping to a whisper that still carried in the cramped bakery. "Hey, Princess, Daddy's running a little late." He forced cheerfulness into his tone that didn't reach his eyes. "About your cake, remember how we talked about sometimes having to wait for special things?" Sophie's tiny voice crackled through the speaker. "But Daddy, will it still have the purple towers like in my picture? I already told everyone at school about it." Robert's throat tightened, the crushing weight of failure pressing against his chest. "Sometimes the gifts that mean the most aren't the ones we buy, but the ones we wait for." His voice cracked on the final word, betraying him. "Okay, Daddy." Sophie's brave attempt at hiding disappointment sliced deeper than any complaint could have. "I love you, infinity." "Love you, infinity plus one, kiddo. See you soon." Robert ended the call, pocketing his phone with trembling fingers, painfully aware of the judgmental stares from those behind him. He mumbled an apology to the cashier and turned to leave, nearly colliding with the woman standing directly behind him. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her dark hair pulled into a sleek, low bun. At 33, Olivia Bennett looked every bit the formidable CEO of Bennett Technologies, except for the unexpected softness in her eyes. "Excuse me," she said, her voice lower and kinder than Robert expected. "I couldn't help overhearing. Which cake were you looking at?" Robert straightened to his full height, professional pride rising to mask his embarrassment. "It's fine, ma'am. We'll figure something out." Olivia's gaze moved to the princess cake, taking in the elaborate creation that had captured Sophie's imagination. "For your daughter, how old is she?" "Turning 7. Robert managed barely above a whisper. 7 was the age when birthday cakes still held magic, when disappointment could shatter small worlds, when fathers were still superheroes who could fix anything. 7 is special. Olivia said, something shifting in her expression. Not pity, understanding. "I'd like to buy her cake." Robert took an instinctive went back, his spine stiffening. "That's very generous, but I can't accept that." The bakery had gone quiet, customers pretending not to eavesdrop while hanging on every word. "It's not charity," Olivia countered, her voice steady and assured. "My mother raised me alone, and there were many birthdays when she couldn't afford what I wanted. Someone helped us once when I was about your daughter's age." She paused, seeming surprised by her own candor. "Sometimes the most generous thing we can do is accept help when our children need it." Robert's calloused hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, the internal war between pride and his daughter's happiness raging silently. Sophie's disappointed voice echoed in his mind. "I really can't," he began. Olivia turned to the cashier before he could finish. "I'll take the princess cake and add a dozen cupcakes." She paused, remembering Sophie's sad voice. "Actually make it 2 dozen. And those chocolate coins that look like treasure." The cashier's eyes widened. "That'll be over $200, ma'am." "Perfect." Olivia handed over a sleek black credit card without hesitation. Robert stood frozen pride, warring with the mental image of Sophie's face lighting up when she saw her dream cake. "I don't know what to say." "Say you will let me come to the party," Olivia replied, surprising herself with the request. "I haven't been to a proper birthday party in years." Well, the invitation wasn't planned, but something about the sincerity in Robert's eyes, his obvious love for his daughter despite difficult circumstances, made her want to see this story through. The board meeting that morning, where she'd had to authorize laying off 200 employees to satisfy shareholders, had left a hollow feeling she couldn't shake. Perhaps this small act of kindness could balance the scales, even if just a little. "I'm Robert Thorne," he finally said, extending his hand. "Olivia Bennett." Her grip was firm, confident. "You really don't have to come," Robert insisted. "Our place is small, nothing fancy." Olivia's smile softened her professional demeanor. "I attend enough fancy events. A real birthday party sounds refreshing." Robert wrote his address on the back of a receipt along with the party time. His handwriting was neat and precise, at odds with his worn work boots and the faded Carhartt jacket that had seen better days. As Olivia took the paper, their fingers brushed briefly. Neither acknowledged the unexpected current that passed between them. "Sophie will probably call you the cake fairy," Robert warned with the hint of a genuine smile. "She has an active imagination." "There are worse things to be called in corporate America," Olivia replied, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal a glimpse of someone who hadn't always moved through the world with such certainty. The 18-year gap between Robert's cramped duplex and his former life felt like centuries. After Michelle left when Sophie was 4, taking everything but their daughter, he'd rebuilt from nothing. The apartment was small but meticulously maintained, a testament to his determination to provide Sophie with stability despite their circumstances. Each morning, Robert woke at 4:30 a.m. for his shift at Baxter's Hardware, where he advised weekend warriors on home improvement projects they'd probably abandon halfway through. His knowledge of HVAC systems gained through 18 years of installing and repairing commercial systems was wasted on recommending the right furnace filter to suburban homeowners. Evenings brought his second job delivering packages for Mercury Ship, the gig economy's answer to reliable employment. Between shifts, he squeezed in applications for positions that might utilize his actual skills, only to face rejection after rejection. 18 years of experience meant little without the degree he'd never had time or money to pursue. The day before Sophie's party, Robert worked double shifts, then stayed up until 2 a.m. transforming their modest living space. Bed sheets became castle walls. Cardboard delivery boxes were cut and painted into turrets, and Christmas lights were rewired into a constellation of stars across the ceiling. His hands, accustomed to the precise work of HVAC installation, crafted delicate paper flowers and fashioned crowns from aluminum foil. The tiny kitchen table, salvaged from a curbside discard, was draped with a purple tablecloth from the dollar store and set with mismatched plates collected from thrift shops. Sophie's drawings, carefully taped to the walls, provided the final touch, a gallery of a child's imagination that no designer could replicate. As dawn broke, Robert surveyed his handiwork with burning eyes. It wasn't perfect, but he'd created something from nothing, the way he always had. Sophie woke with the immediate vibrating excitement only children can muster on their birthdays. She launched herself at Robert's small arms wrapping around his neck. "Did you stay up all night, Daddy? It looks like a real castle." Her gap-toothed smile made every hour of lost sleep worthwhile. "Only the best for Princess Sophie," Robert whispered against her hair, inhaling the scent of the apple shampoo they bought when it was on sale. "Happy birthday, kiddo." "Is the cake fairy really coming?" Sophie asked, wide-eyed with wonder as she took in the transformed living room. "Maddie at school said adults never keep promises, but I told her my daddy always does." Robert's heart clenched. The cake will definitely be here. He carefully sidestepped, confirming whether this mysterious benefactor would actually appear. Despite her assurances, he couldn't imagine someone like Olivia Bennett actually showing up at their shabby duplex on a Saturday afternoon. As he helped Sophie dress in her party outfit, a second-hand princess dress Robert had carefully mended and embellished with additional sparkles, he coached himself to manage her expectations. People like Olivia Bennett didn't cross the invisible lines that separated their worlds. The cake would be enough of a miracle. Sophie twirled in her dress, the patched areas invisible to her delighted eyes. "When everyone sees my cake, they'll know I was telling the truth." Her face clouded momentarily. "Zach said I made it up. He said nobody has cake fairies." "Zach doesn't know everything," Robert replied, straightening her plastic tiara. "Some magic only happens for people who believe in it." The morning passed in a blur of final preparations. Robert's neighbor, Mrs. Kaminsky, arrived early to help, bringing homemade pierogi and her steady, no-nonsense presence. At 73, she'd appointed herself as Sophie's honorary grandmother after Michelle left providing childcare when Robert worked late and a connection to a matriarchal love Sophie otherwise lacked. "You've outdone yourself, Robert," Mrs. Kaminsky pronounced, surveying the transformed apartment. "This princess has a good father." Robert squeezed her shoulder gratefully. "This princess has good people who love her." The first guests arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. Parents Robert recognized from school drop-offs with children clutching store-bought gifts wrapped in bright paper. The duplex quickly filled with the controlled chaos of 7-year-olds, their voices reaching decibel levels that made the adults wince good-naturedly. At 2:30, the bakery delivery still hadn't arrived. Robert checked his phone repeatedly, anxiety building with each passing minute. Sophie kept glancing toward the kitchen, her excitement gradually giving way to the worried expression children wear when they sense adults' tension. At 2:45, a knock at the door silenced the room. Sophie raced to answer it, her dress swishing around her ankles. "Daddy says I can't open the door without a grown-up," she announced, bouncing on her toes as Robert made his way through the crowd. He opened the door expecting a teenage delivery person. Instead, Olivia Bennett stood on his threshold, balancing the elaborate princess cake in her arms. She'd exchanged her corporate armor for dark jeans and a simple blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Behind her, a bakery employee carried trays of cupcakes and chocolate coins. "Special delivery for Princess Sophie," Olivia just announced, her professional confidence momentarily wavering as she took in the child's awestruck expression. Sophie's mouth formed a perfect O. "You're real," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're the cake fairy." A ripple of curious murmurs spread through the gathered parents. Robert felt their questioning glances. Who was this polished woman, clearly from a different social stratum, appearing at their door? "Sophie, this is Miss Bennett," Robert began, trying to establish normalcy. "I'm just someone who believes birthday wishes should come true," Olivia interrupted smoothly, kneeling to Sophie's level despite her designer jeans. "Especially for 7-year-old princesses who draw beautiful pictures." Sophie's eyes widened further. "You saw my picture, Daddy?" "She saw my picture." Robert guided Olivia and the bakery worker inside, hyper-aware of the contrast between Olivia's evident wealth and the humble surroundings he'd worked so hard to beautify. The handcrafted decorations that had seemed charming in isolation now looked painfully makeshift next to Olivia's cashmere sweater and the professional elegance of the cake. The bakery employee set up the desserts while Olivia stood slightly apart, clearly unsure of her place in this gathering. Robert noticed her taking in the transformed space, the bedsheet castle walls, the hand-painted cardboard turrets, the intricate paper flowers with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "You did all this yourself," she said quietly when he approached with a paper cup of fruit punch. Not a question, but an observation. "HVAC guys are good with our hands," Robert replied with a self-deprecating shrug. "Function over form, but it works." "It's extraordinary," Olivia countered, surprising him with her sincerity. "I've been to children's parties in mansions with professional decorators that had less—" She searched for the right word, less heart. Before Robert could respond, Sophie appeared at his side, clutching a handmade crown fashioned from construction paper and covered with glitter. "This is for you, Ms. Cake Fairy," she announced solemnly, holding it up to Olivia. "Daddy says real princesses need crowns." Robert opened his mouth to intervene. Surely a woman who ran a technology empire wouldn't want glitter in her hair, but Olivia was already kneeling down, allowing Sophie to place the crown on her head. "It's perfect," she declared, adjusting it carefully. "Thank you, Your Highness." Sophie beamed, then grabbed Olivia's hand without hesitation. "You have to meet my friends. I had told them all about you, but Zach didn't believe me." As Sophie dragged Olivia into the crowd of children, Robert found himself watching, with a mixture of gratitude and unease. There was kindness in Olivia's gesture, certainly, but experience had taught him that kindness from those in positions of power often came with unexpected costs. The party progressed with the controlled chaos typical of children's gatherings. Sophie and her friends played princess-themed games, their energy seemingly inexhaustible. Robert noticed Olivia gradually relaxing her corporate poise, giving way to genuine enjoyment as she helped with the activities. When it came time for cake, Sophie insisted that Olivia stand beside her while everyone sang. The candles cast a warm glow across Sophie's face as she closed her eyes to make her wish, her expression one of pure concentration. Robert captured the moment with his phone's camera, knowing this memory, his daughter's joy surrounded by friends in their modest home, was worth preserving. What he didn't photograph but couldn't help noticing was Olivia Bennet discreetly wiping a tear from the corner of her eye as Sophie blew out her candles. The unexpected vulnerability in that gesture made something shift in his perception of her. As the party wound down and parents began collecting their sugar-high children, Robert found Olivia in the kitchen quietly washing plastic cups in the tiny sink despite his protests. "You've done more than enough," he insisted, taking a clean dish towel to dry what she'd washed. "I can't believe you actually came." "Neither can I," Olivia admitted, her hands still submerged in soapy water. "I don't typically crash children's parties." She paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. "That board meeting I mentioned, I had to lay off 200 people yesterday. Budget cuts, shareholder demands." Her voice remained steady, but her eyes betrayed her discomfort. "Coming here, seeing what real celebration looks like, it helped." Robert absorbed this information, trying to reconcile the woman elbow-deep in his sink with someone who wielded that kind of power. "Still, thank you. Sophie will remember this forever." "Your daughter is remarkable," Olivia said, handing him the last cup to dry. "She told me she's going to build castles when she grows up. Not pretend ones like Daddy makes, but real ones where people can live." Robert laughed softly. "She's been saying she'll be an architect since she learned the word. Kids got more direction at 7 than I had at 20. The cardboard turrets are impressive engineering," Olivia observed, glancing at the elaborate structures. "Your background is in HVAC systems, right? I overheard you mention it earlier." Robert tensed slightly, wondering if this was leading to pity. 18 years installing and maintaining commercial systems, until the company downsized 6 months ago. "What kind of systems? Residential, commercial?" "Commercial mainly. Large-scale operations, hospitals, office buildings, industrial complexes." Pride crept into his voice despite his attempt at casualness. "I specialized in high-efficiency systems for data centers the last few years. Temperature control is critical when you're housing servers worth millions." Something changed in Olivia's expression, a sharpening of interest, a calculation happening behind her eyes. "You know, it's interesting you mentioned that." She dried her hands on a paper towel, shifting into a posture he recognized from his own negotiations with contractors. "Bennett Technologies is having serious issues with the HVAC system in our main building. The team we had was part of the layoffs I mentioned." Robert maintained a neutral expression, unsure where this was heading. "That's unfortunate timing." "More than unfortunate, it's potentially catastrophic. We house our main servers there, and the temperature regulation has been increasingly unstable. The system is relatively new, but incredibly sophisticated." She studied him with renewed interest. "What kind of work are you doing now?" "Hardware store mornings, package delivery evenings." Robert's tone remained matter-of-fact without self-pity. "It pays the bills, mostly. I need a senior systems manager for our facilities team." Olivia's statement hung in the air between them, direct and unexpected. "Someone who understands commercial HVAC at an expert level, particularly as it relates to server environments." Robert's chest tightened with sudden hope, immediately followed by suspicion. "Ms. Bennet." "Olivia, please." "Olivia, I appreciate what you did today for Sophie, but if this is some kind of charity—" "This isn't charity," she interrupted, her tone shifting to the crisp efficiency he imagined she used in boardrooms. "This is a business need. Our current situation is critical. The system failures are threatening millions in equipment and data. We've had contractors in, but they're just putting bandages on fundamental issues." She met his gaze directly. "I don't need someone who's grateful for a job, Robert. I need someone who knows how to fix problems others can't." Robert leaned against the counter, mind racing. A position like that would transform their lives' healthcare benefits, stable hours, salary instead of hourly wages. But experience had taught him to be wary of windfalls. "I don't have a degree," he said finally. "Most corporate positions require at least a bachelor's these days." "I'm not interested in degrees. I'm interested in capabilities." Olivia reached into her purse and extracted a business card, placing it on the counter between them. "If you're interested, come to this address Monday morning, 9 o'clock. You'll go through our standard technical assessment and interviews." Robert picked up the card, the heavy stock and embossed logo, tangible reminders of the world separating them. "Just like that. Just like that." Olivia glanced toward the living room where Sophie was showing Mrs. Kaminsky how to wear her tiara correctly. For what it's worth, anyone who can create all this, she gestured to the transformed apartment, can probably handle whatever challenges our system throws at them. Before Robert could respond, Sophie burst into the kitchen, still riding her birthday high. Daddy, Mrs. K says I can keep my crown on until bedtime, even though it's past my normal crown-wearing hours. Her eyes landed on Olivia's business card in Robert's hand. What's that? Ms. Bennett thinks Daddy might be able to help fix some problems at her building, Robert explained carefully neutral. Sophie's eyes widened with immediate understanding. Because Daddy can fix anything, he fixed Mrs. K's air conditioner when it was making the scary noise, and he fixed Mr. Rivera's heater when his baby was cold. She turned to Olivia with absolute conviction. Daddy says some people know things from books, but he knows things from his hands and his head together. Olivia smiled at Sophie's fierce advocacy. That's exactly the kind of knowing we need. Will I get to see your castle? Sophie asked, making the intuitive leap that important people naturally lived in castles. It's an office building, not a castle, Robert corrected gently. Surely, Olivia countered, our main campus has a central glass atrium that many people say looks like a modern castle. I think Sophie would find it quite impressive. Sophie's eyes lit up. Can I draw it when we visit? The presumption of when rather than if hung in the air, Sophie's certainty creating its own gravity. Robert felt the pull of possibility warring with his ingrained caution. We'll see, Princess, he hedged, unwilling to make promises he couldn't keep. Miss Bennett is very busy and her building is full of important people doing important work. But you're important too, Daddy, Sophie insisted with the unshakable faith of childhood. You make things better when they're broken. An uncomfortable silence fell Sophie's innocent assessment, cutting closer to truths neither adult was prepared to acknowledge. Robert's importance in his daughter's universe stood in stark contrast to his current economic reality. Olivia's professional success existed alongside the human cost of her recent business decisions. I should go, Olivia said, finally recognizing the growing complexity of the situation. Thank you for allowing me to be part of Sophie's day. As Robert walked her to the door, Sophie ran ahead to gather one last parting gift, a drawing she'd made earlier showing 3 figures holding hands beneath a crayon sun. This is you, and this is me, and this is Daddy, she explained, pointing to each figure in turn. I made your hair extra pretty. Olivia accepted the drawing with surprising reverence. This is beautiful, Sophie. I'll put it up in my office. Promise, Sophie pressed with the intensity children reserve for adult commitments. I promise. Olivia's voice held the same gravity she might use when closing a multi-million-dollar deal. At the doorway, Robert extended his hand formally. Thank you again. Olivia shook it, the professional gesture at odds with the glitter still clinging to her hair from Sophie's crown. Monday, 9 o'clock. The address is on the card. I'll consider it, Robert replied, unwilling to commit despite the opportunity it represented. Olivia nodded, understanding his reservation. You know, the night before my mother took me to my first job interview, she told me something I never forgot. Pride can keep you warm for a night, but it won't keep the lights on for a month. She smiled slightly at the memory. Smart woman, my mother. With that, she was gone, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the whisper of possibility in the cramped duplex. After Sophie finally crashed from her sugar high and fell asleep clutching her new art supplies, Robert sat at the kitchen table, Olivia's business card propped against the salt shaker. Bennett Technologies was a Fortune 500 company, their sleek campus downtown, a world away from the hardware store where he stocked shelves. People like him didn't simply walk into jobs like that, especially not through chance encounters with CEOs and bakeries. His laptop, an outdated model that protested when running anything more demanding than basic browsing, wheezed to life as he searched for information about Bennett Technologies and their enigmatic CEO. Article after article detailed Olivia Bennett's meteoric rise, Stanford MBA, strategic innovations that transformed her family's struggling tech company into an industry leader, recognition as one of the youngest female CEOs in the sector. Nothing in her history suggested impulsive hiring practices or charity cases. The woman who had stood in his kitchen, hands submerged in soapy water, commanded a corporate empire worth billions. It made no sense that she would offer him a position based on a brief conversation at a child's birthday party, unless the need was genuinely as dire as she claimed. Robert's expertise in commercial HVAC systems, particularly those designed for sensitive environments like data centers, was specialized knowledge. If their system was truly failing and their in-house team had been casualties of corporate restructuring, the thought of sophisticated equipment being mishandled made him wince. He'd seen it before: expensive systems compromised by inadequate maintenance or poor understanding of their integrated components. Temperature fluctuations in server environments could cause catastrophic failures, potentially costing millions in equipment damage and data loss. Still, the timing felt too convenient, the opportunity too perfect. Robert had learned the hard way that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Michelle had taught him that lesson thoroughly when she emptied their bank accounts and disappeared while he was working a double shift, leaving only a note explaining she needed more than the life he could provide. His phone chimed with a text from his evening job supervisor: tomorrow's delivery route had been extended, adding an extra 2 hours without additional pay. The message ended with the typical "we appreciate your flexibility" corporate speak that translated to "refuse and we'll find someone more desperate." Robert glanced from his phone to the business card and back again. Minimum wage for backbreaking work versus a corporate position that could change everything for Sophie. Pride versus pragmatism. The decision crystallized slowly as he moved through their nighttime routine, checking the locks, turning down the thermostat to save on heating, washing Sophie's favorite cup for morning. By the time he collapsed onto his pull-out sofa bed, mentally and physically exhausted, he knew what he had to do. Monday morning found Robert awake before his alarm, stomach tight with anticipation. He'd called in sick to the hardware store the first time he'd missed work in 6 months and arranged for Mrs. Kaminsky to take Sophie to school. His one presentable outfit, a navy button-down and khaki pants he normally reserved for parent-teacher conferences, felt woefully inadequate for a corporate interview. Sophie, perceptive as always, noticed his nervousness at breakfast. "Are you going to fix the fairy's castle today, Daddy?" Robert smoothed her hair, buying time to formulate an answer that wouldn't create false expectations. "I'm going to talk to some people at Ms. Bennett's company. They might need someone like me to help with their systems." "They will," Sophie stated with absolute certainty, spreading peanut butter on her toast with methodical precision. "Because you can fix anything, even when Mommy left, and I was sad you fixed that too." Robert's throat tightened at her simple faith. "Some things can't be fixed, Soph. They just get different. Different can be good though, right?" Her small face turned up to his, searching for confirmation. "Like how our apartment is different from a real castle, but it's still good." "Yeah, kiddo, different can be very good." Robert pressed a kiss to the top of her head, inhaling the apple-scented shampoo that grounded him in what mattered most. "Now finish your breakfast. Mrs. K will be here soon." The Bennett Technologies campus loomed against the morning sky, its glass and steel architecture reflecting clouds and sunlight in equal measure. Robert passed through the security checkpoint, hyper-aware of his secondhand dress shoes and the worn messenger bag containing printouts of his work history and reference letters from former clients. The lobby bustled with employees in business casual attire, their confidence and belonging apparent in every movement. Robert approached the reception desk, fighting the urge to turn around and return to the predictable humiliation of stocking shelves and delivering packages. "Robert Thorne for Olivia Bennett," he stated, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. "I have an appointment at 9. The receptionist's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "Ms. Bennett is expecting you. Let me check." Her fingers danced across her keyboard, skepticism evident in her expression. "I don't see you in her calendar." Robert's stomach dropped. Of course. This had been some bizarre impulse on Olivia's part, forgotten as soon as she'd returned to her real world. He was a fool for believing Mr. Thorne. A deep voice interrupted his spiral of self-doubt. "Frank Morales, Facilities Management." A man approached from across the lobby, late 50s, solid build, with the calloused hands and watchful eyes Robert recognized from decades in the trades. He extended his hand grip, firm and assessing. "Ms. Bennett mentioned you'd be coming. I'm supposed to start your technical evaluation." Frank's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held a flicker of curiosity. "Follow me." As they traversed the gleaming corridors, Frank maintained a professional silence that Robert appreciated. No small talk, no probing questions about his connection to the CEO. Just two men with a job to do. The facilities management section occupied a sprawling area in the building's lower level, a stark contrast to the polished corporate spaces above. Here, the aesthetics gave way to functionality, exposed ducting, industrial flooring walls lined with detailed system schematics and maintenance schedules. "So," Frank said finally once they were alone in his cluttered office, "you're the HVAC guy Olivia found." Robert straightened instinctively. 18 years commercial experience. Specialized in high-efficiency systems for critical environments, the last 5. Frank nodded unsurprised. She also mentioned you built a castle out of cardboard that impressed her more than half the engineering she's seen lately. Heat crept up Robert's neck. "That was for my daughter's birthday. Got 3 kids myself. Grown now." Frank leaned back in his chair, studying Robert with newfound interest. "Look, I'm going to level with you because I don't have time for corporate bullshit. We're in trouble down here. The system's failing and none of the fancy consultants they brought in have fixed it. They understand the theory but not the application." Robert recognized the tone, the frustrated expertise of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done but lacked the authority to implement it. "What kind of system are we talking about?" Frank slid a tablet across the desk, displaying the schematics for one of the most sophisticated HVAC setups Robert had ever encountered. Integrated climate control for the main server farm, custom build with proprietary components. The team that installed it was part of the layoffs last quarter. Robert absorbed the details with growing interest, professional instincts overriding his personal reservations. "These temperature fluctuations are concerning. How long has it been unstable?" "Getting worse for about 6 weeks. We had a near shutdown last Friday." Frank's expression darkened. "If those servers go down, we're looking at millions in damage, not counting the data loss." Robert studied the maintenance logs, noting patterns that raised immediate red flags. "Who's been handling the interim maintenance?" "External contractor who doesn't know the system. Band-Aid solutions." Frank's disgust was palpable. "Corporate types don't understand. You can't just plug any technician into a specialized system like this." For the first time since entering the building, Robert felt on solid ground. This wasn't charity or a bizarre whim. This was a genuine crisis in his area of expertise. He could almost see the problems cascading through the system, one adjustment triggering failures elsewhere. "I'd need to see the physical setup," he said, already mentally troubleshooting based on the schematics. Frank's posture relaxed incrementally. "That's the next part of your evaluation. But before we go there, you should know what you're walking into." He leaned forward, voice lowering. "James Wilson, our operations director, is against bringing in someone without corporate credentials. He's pushing to replace the entire system rather than fix it a $20 million project he'd oversee." Robert absorbed this information, understanding the corporate politics at play. "So Ms. Bennett is looking for alternatives." "Ms. Bennett is looking for someone who can actually solve the problem," Frank corrected. "Wilson has an MBA from Wharton and couldn't change his own air filter, but he's got the ear of several board members." The situation clarified in Robert's mind the technical challenge, the political landscape, the stakes involved. This wasn't just about a job opportunity. It was about demonstrating that practical expertise could triumph over theoretical knowledge backed by credentials. "When do I meet him?" Robert asked, already anticipating the confrontation. Frank's weathered face broke into its first genuine smile. "After you see the system, assuming you still want the job once you understand what you're up against." The server room hummed with the contained energy of millions of dollars worth of technology, the air noticeably fluctuating between too cool and too warm, subtle shifts that the average person might not detect, but that made Robert's professional instincts sound alarms. The sophisticated HVAC system controlling this environment was failing incrementally, putting the entire operation at risk. Frank stood back, watching Robert's methodical inspection with the respect one craftsman accords another. No interference, no unnecessary conversation, just space to work. Robert moved through the space with practiced efficiency, noting discrepancies between the system's design specifications and its current operation. His fingers traced connections, eyes scanning for the telltale signs of stress that machines exhibit before catastrophic failure. Each component told part of a story of excellent initial design compromised by inadequate maintenance and inappropriate modifications. "Who approved these bypass adjustments?" he asked, finally pointing to a jury-rigged connection that made him wince internally. Frank's expression darkened. The contractors Wilson brought in last month said it was a temporary solution. It's actively damaging the primary circulation system. Robert replied, the technical challenge overriding his usual reserve. This needs to be restored to the original configuration immediately, then a phased approach to correct the cascading issues it's created. As he continued his assessment, Robert forgot about the intimidating corporate environment, the stakes of this evaluation, even his own precarious financial situation. There was only the problem before him, complex, challenging, but ultimately solvable with the right approach and understanding. 90 minutes later, Robert had compiled a comprehensive analysis of the system's failures in a proposed intervention strategy. Frank reviewed his notes with increasing approval. This matches what I've been trying to tell them for weeks, the older man confirmed. But coming from me, it's just the complaints of an outdated tradesman. Coming from you with your specialized experience, it might actually get through. Robert recognized the bitter undertone in Frank's voice, the frustration of expertise dismissed due to position rather than validity. They should have listened to you from the beginning. Corporate America, son, degrees matter more than results until the crisis hits. Frank checked his watch. Wilson's expecting us upstairs in 15 minutes. Your technical evaluation isn't the issue. I can already tell you know your stuff. The question is whether you can navigate the politics. Robert's confidence faltered. Technical problems followed predictable rules. People with agendas were far more complex. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that part. Frank clapped him on the shoulder, an unexpected gesture of solidarity. Just remember, you know things they don't. Don't let the suits intimidate you. The executive conference room on the 30th floor offered a panoramic view of the city, a physical manifestation of the distance between decision makers and those who implemented their decisions. James Wilson stood at the head of the gleaming table, his tailored suit and carefully styled hair, presenting an image of corporate success. At 35, he was younger than Robert, but projected an authority born of privilege and pedigree. Ah, Mr. Thorne. Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Frank has been showing you our little problem downstairs, I understand. Robert bristled at the dismissive characterization but maintained his professional demeanor. I've completed a preliminary assessment of the HVAC system supporting your server infrastructure. There are multiple critical issues requiring immediate attention. Wilson gestured toward an empty chair, his posture suggesting he was humoring this intrusion into his domain. Yes? Well, we have proposals from several top engineering firms to replace the entire system. Much cleaner solution than patchwork repairs. Replacing the system would be an unnecessary expense. Robert countered, remaining standing as he placed his tablet on the table. The current configuration is actually exceptionally well designed. The failures stem from inappropriate modifications and maintenance protocols. Wilson's smile tightened. I appreciate your hands-on perspective, Mr. Thorne, but our analysts have determined. The conference room door opened, interrupting Wilson mid-dismissal. Olivia Bennett entered, her corporate armor fully in place, charcoal suit hair, pulled back, expression unreadable. No trace remained of the woman who had knelt to receive a paper crown from a 7-year-old girl. James, Frank. She nodded to each, then turned to Robert with professional courtesy that betrayed no prior connection. Mr. Thorne, I understand you've completed your technical assessment. Robert straightened, instinctively aware of being evaluated on multiple levels. Yes, ma'am, I've identified the primary issues and developed a phased intervention plan. Which we appreciate, Wilson interjected smoothly. But as I was explaining, replacement is the more prudent approach given the critical nature of. I'd like to hear Mr. Thorne's assessment, Olivia interrupted, taking a seat and gesturing for Robert to continue. For the next 20 minutes, Robert outlined his findings with the precise technical language and confident delivery that had once made him the go-to system specialist for high-priority clients. He explained the cascading failures triggered by inappropriate modifications, the projected timeline for system collapse if left uncorrected, and his proposed intervention strategy. Throughout his presentation, Wilson's expression grew increasingly sour, while Olivia listened with focused attention, asking occasional questions that demonstrated her grasp of the technical concepts involved. Bottom line, Robert concluded, your system doesn't need replacement. It needs proper maintenance and restoration of its original design integrity with targeted upgrades to specific components. The cost difference is substantial. Wilson cleared his throat, reasserting his position. While this analysis is interesting, it fails to account for the business continuity risks. Our shareholders expect Our shareholders expect us to make sound financial decisions. Olivia cut in, her tone pleasant but unyielding. Mr. Thorne, what would your approach, cost versus full replacement? Robert met her gaze directly. Approximately $2 million for my proposed solution compared to $20 million for replacement. With proper maintenance protocols implemented afterward, you'd extend the current system's life by at least 5 years. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Wilson's proposal had just been effectively dismantled by a man in second-hand dress shoes who had spent the previous day stocking shelves at a hardware store. "This is all very enlightening," Wilson finally said, voice tight with controlled anger. "But I'm curious, Mrs. Bennett, how did Mr. Thorne come to our attention? He doesn't seem to have the credentials we typically require for senior positions." The subtle emphasis on credentials hung in the air, the implication clear. Robert tensed, preparing for the revelation that would frame him as a charity case the unemployed single father Olivia had taken pity on. "Mr. Thorne came highly recommended by industry contacts for his expertise in precisely the systems we use," Olivia replied smoothly, no hint of their actual meeting in her tone. "His hands-on experience with our exact configuration makes him uniquely qualified to address our current crisis." Robert kept his expression neutral, understanding the gift she'd just given him. Professional dignity, a chance to be judged on his capabilities rather than his circumstances. "I see," Wilson replied clearly, not believing this explanation, but unable to challenge his CEO directly. "Well, it's certainly an alternative perspective worth considering." "It's more than that," Olivia corrected, standing to signal the meeting's conclusion. "Mr. Thorne, can you start immediately if we offer you the position?" The directness of the question caught Robert off guard. "I would need to arrange childcare for my daughter," he answered honestly. "But otherwise, yes." Something flickered across Olivia's expression. Recognition of the practical challenges single parenthood presented even in the face of professional opportunity. "Our company has a family-friendly policy that includes emergency childcare options and flexible scheduling for parents. Frank can brief you on those details." Wilson's jaw tightened visibly. "We haven't finalized the hiring decision. There are protocols, background checks, all of which can proceed while Mr. Thorne begins addressing our immediate system crisis." Olivia interrupted, her tone, making it clear the decision was made. "Frank, please get Mr. Thorne whatever access and resources he needs. James will discuss the budget reallocation this afternoon." With that, she exited the conference room, leaving behind a palpable shift in the room's power dynamics. Wilson gathered his materials with barely concealed fury, departing without another word to Robert or Frank. Once they were alone, Frank released a low whistle. "Well, that was something. I haven't seen Wilson shut down that thoroughly in years." Robert remained standing still, processing what had just occurred. "I didn't expect it to be that confrontational. Wilson's been pushing for that system replacement because it would be a major feather in his cap," Frank explained. "You just cost him his moment of glory with a solution that's 1/10 the price. He won't forget that." The implications settled heavily on Robert's shoulders. He'd just made a powerful enemy on his first day before even officially accepting the position. "Is this how it always works here?" Frank's weathered face creased with unexpected humor. "Welcome to corporate America, son. The HVAC systems are a lot easier to fix than the people operating them." As they exited the conference room, Robert's phone vibrated with an incoming call, Sophie's school. His stomach dropped as he answered, already anticipating the problem. "Mr. Thorne, this is Nurse Brennan from Parkside Elementary. Sophie's running a temperature of 101, and we need you to pick her up as soon as possible." Robert's mind raced, calculating the impossibility of the situation. His first day at a potential job that could transform their lives, a critical system failure he'd just been authorized to address, and now Sophie needed him immediately. Frank watched the internal struggle play out on Robert's face, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Your kid," Robert nodded, covering the phone briefly. "Fever. School needs me to get her now." To his surprise, Frank showed no judgment or disappointment, just the pragmatic acceptance of another parent who'd faced similar dilemmas. Go, I'll tell Olivia. Family comes first around here despite what Wilson's type might think. But the system won't collapse in the next few hours, Frank finished for him. We've been limping along for weeks. Get your daughter. The job will be here when you get back. Robert hesitated, years of employment, insecurity, making him doubt that any corporate position would accommodate a parent's responsibilities so readily. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he told the nurse, decision made. To Frank, he added, please tell Ms. Bennett I'll return as soon as I can make arrangements for Sophie. Just go, Frank repeated, his expression softening with understanding. Some things are more important than HVAC systems, even multi-million-dollar ones. As Robert hurried toward the elevator, the weight of his decision pressed against his chest. He'd waited months for an opportunity like this, a chance to rebuild their lives, to provide Sophie with stability and security. Now, on the very threshold of that opportunity, he was walking away to pick up his sick child. The elevator doors closed on the gleaming corporate world he'd briefly glimpsed, leaving him alone with his reflection in the polished metal. In it, he saw not the desperate failure he'd feared becoming, but a father making the only choice he could live with. Some systems, once broken, could never be repaired. Sophie had already lost one parent to ambition and selfishness. Robert would not let her lose the only one she had left, not even for the sake of their future security. The pediatric urgent care center buzzed with the subdued energy of sick children and worried parents. Robert sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, Sophie's feverish body curled against his chest, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in one hand. The doctor had diagnosed strep throat, prescribed antibiotics, and advised at least 2 days of home recovery, 2 days away from a job he hadn't even officially started, 2 days during which Wilson could potentially undermine the opportunity Olivia had offered. The sick irony wasn't lost on Robert. The very reason he needed this job so desperately was now jeopardizing his chance of securing it. Daddy, Sophie murmured against his shirt, her voice raspy. Did you fix the castle today? Not yet, princess, he answered softly, smoothing back her sweat-dampened hair. You got sick, so I came to get you instead. Sophie's fever-bright eyes blinked up at him. But what about the important job? The fairy lady will be mad. Some things are more important than jobs, Robert replied, the truth of it settling into his bones despite his practical concerns. You're the most important thing always. A nurse approached with discharge, paperwork, and prescription details, her practiced efficiency softening when she noticed Sophie's drowsy state. Strep's rough, but kids bounce back quickly. She should be feeling better by tomorrow evening if she starts the antibiotics right away. Robert thanked her, mentally calculating the pharmacy cost against their dwindling funds. The promised salary from Bennett Technologies would make such calculations unnecessary, but that assumed the job would still be there after today's abrupt departure. As he gathered their belongings, balancing Sophie and her backpack, a familiar figure appeared in the clinic doorway. Olivia Bennett stood scanning the waiting room, her corporate attire making her conspicuously out of place among the harried parents and sick children. Their eyes met across the room, surprise registering on both faces. Olivia approached cautiously, her expression shifting to concern as she took in Sophie's flushed cheeks in listless posture. Frank told me what happened, she said quietly, maintaining a respectful distance. I wanted to check if there was anything you needed. Robert blinked, momentarily speechless at finding his potential CEO standing in a pediatric clinic. That's very considerate but unnecessary. We're managing. Sophie stirred against his chest, bleary eyes focusing on Olivia. Cake fairy, she whispered, a ghost of her usual smile appearing despite her discomfort. Did Daddy fix your castle? Olivia's professional demeanor softened immediately. Not yet, sweetheart, but he will as soon as you're feeling better. The doctor says it is strep throat, Robert explained, shifting Sophie's weight as she grew heavier in his arms. She'll need a couple of days at home. He didn't explicitly state the obvious implication that he couldn't start work immediately as Olivia had requested. The acknowledgement hung between them, unspoken but unavoidable. Our benefits package includes sick childcare, Olivia said, matching his matter-of-fact tone. On-site nurses who can come to your home when employees' children are ill. It's available from day one of employment. Robert's surprise must have shown on his face because she continued, it's a practical business decision, not charity. Parents make reliable employees when they don't have to choose between their children and their jobs. Before Robert could respond, a pharmacy technician called his name, indicating his prescription was ready. Olivia gestured for him to handle it, a silent acknowledgement of the priorities at hand. When he returned with Sophie's medication, Olivia had moved to a quieter corner of the waiting room away from the crowded seating area. She held out a folder containing employment documents. Your position is systems manager, reporting to Frank Morales. Your salary is noted on page 3, along with benefits details. Her tone remained professional, but with an underlying warmth that hadn't been present in the corporate conference room. You can start officially once Sophie is well enough for school. Robert shifted Sophie to his other arm, accepting the folder with his free hand. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? For a moment, Olivia's carefully maintained professional facade slipped, revealing something more complex beneath. Because I recognize capability when I see it. Because our company needs exactly what you bring to the table. And because she hesitated, choosing her next words carefully, I remember what it's like when the world doesn't make space for family responsibilities. Sophie stirred against Robert's shoulder, her small hand reaching out to touch Olivia's sleeve. Are you going to help Daddy fix things? He says some jobs are too big for just one person. The simple question hung in the air between them, laden with meanings beyond a child's understanding. Olivia looked from Sophie to Robert, something unreadable passing across her expression. Yes, she answered finally with the same gravity she'd used when accepting Sophie's drawing. I think we'll fix things together. As they parted ways in the clinic parking lot, Robert to take Sophie home for rest and medicine, Olivia to return to the corporate world that defined her public identity, and unspoken understanding passed between them. This wasn't merely about employment or even a failing HVAC system. It was about recognition across the invisible boundaries that separated their worlds and the possibility that those boundaries might be more permeable than either had believed. Robert watched Olivia's sleek car pull away, Sophie drowsing against his chest, the employment folder tucked securely under his arm. For the first time in 6 months, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter, not because their problems were solved, but because he no longer faced them completely alone. Sometimes the most unexpected connections formed in the spaces between worlds: a CEO in a bakery, a father building castles from cardboard, a child who saw magic where adults saw only limitations. Whether those connections could withstand the pressures of reality remained to be seen, but for now, the possibility itself was enough to sustain hope. Sophie's fever broke the following morning, her natural resilience asserting itself against the strep infection. Robert watched her color improve as she sat propped against pillows on their worn couch, her favorite cartoon playing on the tablet they'd saved months to purchase. The employment folder from Bennett Technologies lay open on the kitchen table, its contents studied and restudied throughout the night while Sophie slept. The salary figure made Robert's breath catch each time he looked at it, triple his current combined income from 2 exhausting jobs. Healthcare benefits that would cover Sophie's checkups and prescriptions without the agonizing calculations of whether medicine or rent took priority this month. A 401k with company matching that would allow him for the first time since Michelle left to think beyond immediate survival. It seemed impossible, this sudden reversal of fortune. People like him didn't simply stumble into corporate positions with corner offices and catered lunches. The familiar whisper of suspicion returned. What did Olivia Bennett really want from this arrangement? Her appearance at the clinic yesterday defied explanation. CEOs didn't personally deliver employment contracts or express concern for the health of employees' children, unless her interest extended beyond professional courtesy. The thought lodged uncomfortably in Robert's mind, unwelcome but persistent. She was undeniably attractive, unattached according to the articles he'd researched, and had shown unusual interest in their lives. If her motivations ventured into personal territory, the professional opportunity became considerably more complicated. Sophie's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Daddy is the medicine making my germ dead, yet I want to see the fairy's castle. Robert moved to the couch, pressing his palm to her forehead, cooler, though still warmer than normal. The medicine is working, but germs need time to go away completely. We can't risk getting other people sick. But what about your new job? Sophie's concern reflected his own priorities back to him, always worrying about others, even at 7. The fairy lady needs you to fix her castle. Ms. Bennett, Robert corrected gently, and the building will be fine for another day. Frank is watching things until I can start. Frank had called late yesterday, gruffly reporting that the system had stabilized temporarily and expressing genuine concern for Sophie's condition. The veteran facilities manager had also volunteered information. Robert hadn't requested that Olivia Bennett had returned from the clinic and immediately implemented policy changes strengthening the company's family leave provisions. She went straight to legal and HR. Frank had explained, disbelief coloring his tone. Said her visit to the pediatric clinic was an eye-opening experience about the challenges working parents face. Wilson nearly had an aneurysm when she announced the changes at the executive meeting. Now, as Sophie dozed off again, medication pulling her toward healing sleep, Robert's phone chimed with a text from Olivia herself. "How is Sophie today? No pressure to respond or report to work. System stable for now." The direct communication from the CEO to a technically not yet employed facilities manager violated every corporate hierarchy Robert had ever encountered. He hesitated before replying, "Fever down. Doctor says contagious for 24 hours after starting antibiotics. Can report tomorrow if needed." Her response came immediately, "Tomorrow is perfect. Bringing Sophie, our family room is available if needed." The casual mention of bringing his sick child to a corporate environment struck Robert as surreal. His previous employers had barely tolerated phone calls from school, let alone the actual presence of children in the workplace. "She should be well enough for school tomorrow. Thank you for the option." Three dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared, suggesting Olivia was composing, deleting, and recomposing her response, a surprisingly human gesture from someone whose public persona projected unwavering confidence. "Finally, looking forward to having you officially on board. The team has been briefed. Frank is eager for your return." Robert set the phone aside, unsettled by the exchange. In his experience, good fortune always came with hidden costs. Nothing was freely given, especially by those with power. Yet Olivia's actions thus far had been consistently supportive without obvious ulterior motives. Perhaps the most disorienting aspect was the speed of the transformation. 72 hours ago, he'd been canceling a birthday cake he couldn't afford. Tomorrow, he'd walk into an executive position with benefits most Americans spent decades working toward. The whiplash between scarcity and opportunity left him dizzy with possibility and suspicion in equal measure. As Sophie slept peacefully, medication fighting her infection, Robert allowed himself to hope cautiously, with the practiced restraint of someone accustomed to disappointment, that this opportunity might be exactly what it appeared, a chance to rebuild their lives on more solid ground. Monday morning arrived with Sophie declared well enough for school, and Robert dressed in his one presentable outfit, freshly ironed but unmistakably dated compared to the business casual he'd observed at Bennett Technologies. They stood together at their door, Sophie's backpack filled with makeup assignments and Robert's messenger bag containing the signed employment documents. "Remember, Mrs. K will pick you up if I'm not done by school's out," Robert reminded, kneeling to straighten Sophie's collar. "And the nurse has my work number if you start feeling bad again." Sophie nodded solemnly, then reached up to straighten his tie with the same careful attention he'd given her collar. "You look handsome, Daddy, like the dads on TV who have important meetings." Robert's throat tightened at her innocent assessment. "Just fixing air conditioners, kiddo. Not exactly world-changing work. But if the air doesn't work, then the computers don't work. And if the computers don't work, the whole world gets messed up," Sophie reasoned with flawless 7-year-old logic. "So you're fixing the whole world, basically." Robert laughed despite his nerves, Sophie's perspective cutting through his anxiety. "When you put it that way, I'd better not mess up." The Bennett Technologies campus appeared different in morning light, less intimidating, more purposeful, as employees streamed through its glass doors clutching coffee cups and briefcases. Robert's employee badge had been processed with remarkable efficiency, waiting for him at security, along with an escort to take him directly to the facilities management section. Frank greeted him with a firm handshake that communicated more than words: professional respect, acknowledgement of Robert's choice to prioritize his daughter, and subtle warning about the day ahead. "Wilson's been busy while you were gone. Called in an outside engineering consultant who's backing his replacement plan." Robert absorbed this information with growing unease. Office politics had already formed battle lines around him before he'd even officially started. "What's our play here?" Frank's weathered face creased with approval at the hour. a small but significant indicator that Robert understood teamwork transcended corporate hierarchy. Olivia's called a meeting at 10. The consultant will present his assessment, then you'll counter with yours. She specifically requested both views before making a final decision. The message was clear: Robert would have to prove himself again, this time against a credentialed professional with corporate experience. The temporary alliance with Olivia provided no guarantee of victory if the consultant's assessment appeared more credible to the board. I need to see how the system's running today before I can finalize my recommendations, Robert said, already mentally cataloging the additional data points he needed to collect. Frank nodded toward a workstation already set up with system monitoring software. All yours. I'll run interference with the suits while you get what you need. For the next 2 hours, Robert lost himself in the technical puzzle of the failing system, meticulously documenting temperature fluctuations, identifying control sequence errors, and mapping the cascading failures resulting from the inappropriate modifications. The work centered him, replacing personal anxiety with professional confidence. This was his element: complex systems with logical problems requiring practical solutions. At 9:45, Frank reappeared. Time to suit up for battle. Wilson's consultant is already in the conference room showing off his MIT credentials to anyone who'll listen. Robert saved his analysis, gathered his notes, and followed Frank toward the executive floor, hyper-aware of the contrast between his second-hand clothes and the polished affluence surrounding them. As they approached the conference room, a familiar voice drifted through the partially open door. Simply cannot justify continuing to patch a fundamentally flawed system, a male voice declared with practiced authority. The risk to operational continuity far outweighs the capital expenditure of replacement. The conference room fell silent as Robert and Frank entered. James Wilson stood beside a professionally dressed man in his 40s who radiated academic confidence, undoubtedly the consultant. Olivia sat at the head of the table, her expression neutral but attentive. Several board members Robert hadn't previously met occupied the remaining seats, their collective focus creating an atmosphere of corporate judgment. "Ah, Mr. Thorne," Wilson's voice carried calculated skepticism. "How fortunate that your personal situation has resolved, allowing you to join us. Dr. Harrison was just explaining why the Band-Aid approach to our HVAC issues is fundamentally misguided. The deliberate emphasis on the consultant's title and the dismissive characterization of Robert's solution established the intended dynamic immediately. Dr. Harrison versus Mr. Thorne. Academic credentials versus practical experience. Replacement versus repair." Olivia's voice cut through the tension with professional courtesy. "Robert, thank you for joining us. Dr. Harrison has recommended full system replacement at an estimated cost of $23 million. We'd like to hear your alternative assessment before making our decision." Robert nodded, setting up his tablet to display the diagnostic data he'd collected. The familiar confidence of expertise settled over him, displacing his earlier anxiety about corporate politics. "Thank you for the opportunity. I've completed a comprehensive analysis of the current system's performance failure patterns and maintenance history." For the next 15 minutes, Robert presented his findings with methodical precision, focusing on the specific issues undermining the system's performance rather than the theoretical advantages of replacement. He outlined a 3-phase intervention that would restore functionality while implementing targeted upgrades to address evolving needs. "The bottom line," he concluded, "is that we can achieve optimal performance for approximately $2 million with minimal disruption to operations. The system's core architecture is sound. It's the maintenance approach that's failed, not the equipment itself." Dr. Harrison cleared his throat with professional skepticism. "While Mr. Thorne's hands-on assessment has merit, it fails to account for the statistical probability of cascading failures in aging infrastructure. Our risk matrices clearly indicate—" "With respect, Dr. Harrison," Robert interrupted, "a lifetime of being underestimated." Hardening his resolve. "Your risk matrices are based on generalized system specifications, not the custom configuration actually installed here. The components showing wear are the ones that have been improperly maintained or modified against manufacturer recommendations." A subtle shift occurred in the room, board members exchanging glances. Olivia's posture straightening slightly, Wilson's jaw tightening with barely concealed frustration. The battle lines between academic theory and practical application had been clearly drawn. Dr. Harrison adjusted his approach, directing his argument toward the executives rather than engaging directly with Robert. Board members should consider the long-term capital implications. A new system offers warranty protection, manufacturer support, and technological advancements that refurbishment simply cannot match. Except that the current system already incorporates those technological advancements. Robert countered, pulling up comparative specifications on his tablet. It was custom designed for this facility less than 5 years ago. The manufacturer still supports all components. What's failing is the maintenance protocol, not the technology. The technical debate continued, growing increasingly detailed as Robert and Dr. Harrison traded assessments and counter-arguments. Throughout the exchange, Olivia remained silent, her attention shifting between the two men with analytical focus. Finally, she raised her hand, halting the technical volley mid-flow. I've heard enough to make an initial decision. We'll proceed with Mr. Thorne's three-phase approach with one modification. Dr. Harrison will serve as independent verification at each milestone to ensure the solutions meet our risk management requirements. The compromise caught everyone by surprise. Wilson opened his mouth to object, then closed it under Olivia's steady gaze. Dr. Harrison nodded with professional acceptance, though his expression suggested he expected to be vindicating his original assessment soon enough. Mr. Thorne will have operational authority for implementation, reporting directly to Frank Morales. Olivia continued, establishing the chain of command with unmistakable clarity. James, your team will provide necessary administrative support. We'll reassess after Phase 1 completion in 2 weeks. With the decision made, the meeting adjourned into small clusters of conversation. Robert found himself face-to-face with Dr. Harrison, who studied him with reluctant professional curiosity. Interesting approach to the condensation issues on the Eastern input manifold, the consultant admitted grudgingly. Not textbook, but potentially effective. Field solutions rarely match textbooks, Robert replied, extending professional courtesy despite their opposing positions. 18 years of retrofitting these systems teaches you to work with what's actually there, not what should theoretically be there. Dr. Harrison's expression shifted slightly, academic certainty yielding incrementally to practical wisdom. I still believe replacement offers better long-term value, but your analysis of the control sequence failures was thorough. The consultant's provisional acknowledgement of Robert's expertise represented a small victory in the larger battle for professional respect. Before Robert could respond, Wilson appeared at Dr. Harrison's elbow, steering him away with barely concealed urgency, clearly concerned about fraternization between his chosen expert and the upstart threatening his plans. Frank materialized at Robert's side, watching Wilson's retreat with grim satisfaction. Round 1 goes to the practical man. But Wilson won't give up his replacement plan, easily too much potential glory in a $23 million project with his name attached. Why does Olivia care so much about this particular system? Robert asked quietly, the question that had been nagging at him since their first encounter. CEOs don't typically get involved in facilities decisions at this level of detail. Frank hesitated, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. The system controls environment for the Phoenix project servers Bennett Technologies' next-generation AI platform. If those servers go down, the company loses its competitive edge in the market, billions in potential revenue, and years of research at risk. The stakes clarified in Robert's mind. This wasn't merely about cost savings or operational efficiency. It was about protecting the company's future against both external competition and internal politics. Olivia's interest wasn't personal or charitable. It was fiercely practical. As the conference room emptied, Olivia approached, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Your assessment was compelling. I'm particularly interested in your proposal for monitoring system adjustments in real time rather than relying on quarterly maintenance cycles. Most failures occur between scheduled maintenance, Robert explained, shifting fully into his area of expertise. Real-time monitoring catches problems before they cascade into critical failures. Implement that first, Olivia directed, her focus entirely professional. I want daily reports until the system stabilizes, then we can discuss the appropriate ongoing cadence. The interaction remained purely business-focused, with no reference to their previous personal encounters or Sophie's health, a clear signal that within these walls their relationship was strictly professional. Robert appreciated the boundary, relieved that his concerns about potential personal complications appeared unfounded. As Olivia departed for her next meeting, Frank clapped Robert on the shoulder with unexpected enthusiasm. Congratulations, you've survived your first executive showdown. Now the real work begins. The next week passed in a blur of technical challenges and corporate adjustments. Robert divided his time between hands-on system repairs and navigating the unfamiliar terrain of corporate protocols. Frank proved an invaluable guide to the unwritten rules of the organization, while Robert's growing team of technicians responded positively to his practical leadership approach. Sophie adapted to the new schedule with resilient enthusiasm, proudly telling her teachers and friends about her father's important job fixing the fairy's castle computers. The increase in income allowed Robert to enroll her in the after-school art program she'd longed for, where her architectural drawings of increasingly elaborate castles earned praise from instructors impressed by her spatial awareness and creativity. Their home life stabilized into a new routine, mornings less rushed, without the hardware store shift, evenings free from exhausting package deliveries. For the first time in years, Robert had energy to help with homework, cook proper meals, and listen to Sophie's elaborate stories without the bone-deep fatigue that had previously colored their interactions. The professional challenges, however, grew increasingly complex. As Robert implemented the first phase of system repairs, Wilson's opposition evolved from direct confrontation to bureaucratic obstruction. Necessary parts mysteriously delayed work orders requiring excessive documentation, administrative support perpetually unavailable. Frank advised patience and documentation of each instance, building a case for when the pattern became undeniable. Wilson's smart enough not to leave fingerprints, but consistent obstruction eventually becomes visible, even to those who don't want to see it. On Thursday morning, 10 days into implementation, the system monitoring alerts triggered at 3:17 a.m., sending notifications to Robert's phone. A critical cooling component was failing in the server room, housing the Phoenix project's main processors, precisely the catastrophic scenario his improvements were designed to prevent. Robert arrived on campus by 4:00 a.m., finding Frank already on site with a skeleton crew of technicians. The server room temperature had risen to concerning levels, automated failovers, struggling to compensate for the component failure. "We've got maybe 2 hours before we hit critical threshold," Frank warned, the displays showing steadily climbing temperature curves. "Parts we need are locked in procurement, require Wilson's sign-off to release emergency inventory." Robert assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. "We don't need the new parts yet. We can bypass the failing component, temporarily reroute through the secondary system while we fabricate an interim solution." For the next 90 minutes, Robert worked alongside his team in seamless coordination, implementing a field modification that wouldn't appear in any manual, but drew on decades of practical problem solving. As dawn broke over the campus, the temperature curve stabilized, then gradually descended toward optimal ranges. "Not pretty, but it's holding," Robert declared, wiping sweat from his forehead as the immediate crisis passed. "We need those approved parts within 48 hours to implement a proper solution." Frank nodded grimly. "Wilson's conveniently unreachable this morning executive golf retreat. I've escalated to procurement, but they're insisting on proper authorization channels." Before Robert could respond, the server room door opened, admitting Olivia in casual clothes, clearly having rushed in from home without the usual corporate attire. Her gaze swept the space, taking in the improvised bypass configuration and the exhausted technical team. "What's our status? No preamble, no corporate niceties, just direct engagement with the crisis at hand." Frank deferred to Robert, who outlined the situation with technical precision: the component failure, the obstructed proper repairs, and the field modification currently preventing disaster. "We're stable for now, but this is a temporary solution. We need the proper parts immediately, regardless of procurement protocols." Olivia absorbed the information, her expression hardening as the pattern of obstruction became clear. "Show me exactly what parts you need and where they're currently held." When Robert pulled up the inventory system showing the components locked in administrative hold, pending Wilson's approval, Olivia made a single phone call. Her voice remained measured but carried unmistakable authority. "This is Bennett. Override the administrative hold on inventory items TR7842 and CS9103. Release to facilities immediately. Yes, I understand it requires executive approval. Consider this your approval." The call lasted less than 30 seconds but transformed the situation completely. Within 15 minutes, a procurement officer arrived with the needed components, clearly uncomfortable with the protocol violation, but unwilling to contradict the CEO's direct order. As the team implemented the proper repairs, Olivia drew Robert aside, her expression reflecting both approval of his emergency solution and concern about the larger pattern. This obstruction ends today. Document every instance where Wilson's actions have impeded your work. I need a complete report by end of day. The directive carried unmistakable significance. Evidence was being gathered, consequences were coming. Robert had inadvertently become a central figure in a corporate power struggle that extended far beyond HVAC systems. The Phoenix Project is my priority, not internal politics. Olivia continued, addressing his unspoken concern. If Wilson's agenda is threatening that priority, I need to act decisively. The conversation remained professionally focused, but Robert detected something beyond corporate interest in her intensity, a personal investment in both the project's success and the fair treatment of those implementing it. The realization that she might genuinely value his contribution based on merit, rather than charity, shifted something fundamental in his perception of their dynamic. As the crisis resolved and normal operations resumed, Robert returned to his office to compile the requested documentation. The pattern emerged with damning clarity: systematic obstruction, creating precisely the emergency scenario Wilson had predicted as inevitable, potentially justifying his replacement plan despite Robert's successful intervention. The implications turned Robert's stomach. If Wilson had deliberately engineered conditions to force a system failure, he had knowingly risked millions of dollars in equipment and research, all to prove himself right and advance his career through a massive replacement project. As he completed the report, an email notification appeared on his screen, a calendar invitation for Sophie's elementary school art showcase the following evening. In the chaos of the emergency, he'd nearly forgotten his promise to attend her first public exhibition of the architectural drawings that had become her passion. The timing created an immediate conflict. Olivia had scheduled an executive review of Robert's report and the morning's incident for the exact same hour as Sophie's event. Missing either carried significant consequences, disappointing his daughter, or potentially undermining the professional opportunity that had transformed their lives. Robert sat back in his chair, the familiar weight of competing priorities settling across his shoulders. Before Bennett Technologies, the choice would have been agonizing but clear. Sophie always came first regardless of professional consequences. But now, with so much at stake, with Wilson's machinations threatening both the project and Robert's position, the calculation felt more complex. His cursor hovered over the calendar invitation, torn between accepting and proposing an alternative time for the executive meeting. Before he could decide, a text message appeared on his phone from Olivia, not through her assistant or official channels. Saw Sophie's art showcase on your calendar. We'll reschedule the executive review. Some priorities transcend business. The message, direct and personal, resolved the immediate conflict, but raised new questions about boundaries and observation. How had Olivia seen his personal calendar entry? The corporate culture of transparency suddenly felt less benevolent and more invasive. Robert's phone chimed again with a follow-up message. Calendar integration pulls family events into visibility for scheduling conflicts. Can disable this feature if you prefer privacy. Standard for executive team. The explanation made sense within corporate logic, but highlighted the fundamental differences between his previous working-class existence and this new corporate reality. Privacy had different meanings across the invisible boundaries, separating their world's boundaries that continued to blur with each interaction. As he navigated these unfamiliar waters, Robert remained acutely aware that this opportunity, however transformative, came with the strings attached, not the personal entanglements he'd initially feared, but the complex web of corporate expectations, visibility, and politics that now surrounded his every decision. Friday evening found Robert seated in the elementary school auditorium, Sophie's artwork prominently displayed among dozens of student pieces. Her architectural drawings stood out for their unusual perspective and detail at castle structures that incorporated elements from Bennett Technologies' distinctive building design, reimagined through a child's creative lens. She has remarkable spatial awareness. Sophie's art teacher commented, stopping beside Robert to admire the detailed renderings. Most children her age struggle with perspective, but she naturally incorporates three-dimensional thinking. Has she always been interested in architecture? Robert nodded, pride momentarily displacing his professional concerns. Since she could hold a crayon, she says she's going to build real castles someday, not just pretend ones. With this foundation, she very well might, the teacher agreed before moving on to greet other parents. As Robert studied the drawings more closely, he noticed elements that revealed Sophie's perception of their changing circumstances. The castle walls less defensive, the windows larger and more welcoming, the structure itself more expansive than her previous confined designs. Her artistic expression reflected their evolving reality from scarcity to possibility, from survival to potential flourishing. She's quite talented. The familiar voice startled Robert from his contemplation. Olivia stood beside him, dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse deliberately understated compared to her corporate attire, yet still unmistakably elegant. Her presence at a school function outside the boundaries of their professional relationship created an immediate tension. You didn't need to come. Robert kept his voice neutral, aware of curious glances from other parents who recognized the distinctive CEO from news coverage and company materials. I promised Sophie I'd see her castle drawings the next time she made them. Olivia replied, simply studying the artwork with genuine interest. She has an instinctive understanding of structural integrity while maintaining aesthetic appeal, a rare combination. Before Robert could formulate a response that adequately addressed the boundary crossing, Sophie appeared, her face lighting with excitement upon seeing both adults admiring her work. You came, both of you. Her voice carried childish delight untouched by adult complications. Do you like my new castle designs? I made them bigger because Daddy says we don't have to worry so much about space anymore. The innocent declaration hung in the air between them. Sophie's artless acknowledgement of how Olivia's intervention had changed their circumstances. Robert felt heat rise in his neck, the implied gratitude undermining his careful maintenance of professional boundaries. Olivia knelt to Sophie's level, maintaining the connection they'd established at the birthday party. I love how you've designed the windows to follow the sun's path. That's very advanced thinking. Architects call it passive solar design. Sophie's eyes widened at the professional terminology. Is that real architect words? Daddy, did you hear it? I'm doing real architect things? The excitement in her voice momentarily suspended Robert's concerns about appropriate boundaries. Whatever complex adult dynamics existed between himself and Olivia, Sophie's joy existed independently, untainted by corporate politics or class divisions. As Sophie eagerly explained her design concepts to Olivia, using newly acquired vocabulary with determined precision, Robert observed their interaction with growing awareness of its significance for his daughter. Beyond material improvements, Olivia's presence offered Sophie something he couldn't provide alone, a female figure who embodied professional success and took Sophie's aspirations seriously. The realization softened his instinctive resistance to Olivia's appearance at the school event. Perhaps some boundaries could be selectively permeable without completely collapsing the necessary professional distance between them. As the evening progressed, Robert found himself navigating dual roles, father proudly supporting his daughter's artistic debut, and employee maintaining appropriate boundaries with his CEO in a public setting. The delicate balance required constant adjustment, particularly as other parents approached with curious questions about their apparent connection. When the showcase concluded, Sophie insisted on giving Olivia a tour of her classroom and introducing her to friends who remembered the cake fairy from her birthday party. Robert followed slightly behind, watching his daughter confidently lead the powerful executive through her educational domain with the natural authority children possess in spaces they consider their own. In the parking lot afterward, as Sophie examined a new sketchbook Olivia had brought as a gift, Robert finally addressed the unspoken tension. I appreciate your support of Sophie, but we should probably establish some guidelines about work-life separation. Olivia met his gaze directly, neither defensive nor apologetic. Fair concern. I didn't intend to complicate your professional position by attending tonight. Sophie specifically invited me last week via the note she asked Frank to deliver. The revelation that Sophie had orchestrated this meeting without his knowledge shifted Robert's perception of the situation. His daughter had independently maintained the connection that began at her birthday party, bypassing his protective instincts to nurture a relationship she clearly valued. She didn't mention inviting you, Robert admitted, glancing towards Sophie, who was showing her new sketchbook to a classmate several yards away. Children often create their own networks of significant adults, Olivia observed with unexpected insight. I had many unofficial aunts and uncles growing up, my mother's friends and colleagues who expanded my world beyond what she could provide alone. The comment carried no judgment, yet Robert felt the implicit acknowledgement of his limitations as a single parent, not a criticism, but a reality they both recognized. Before he could respond, Sophie rejoined them, clutching her sketchbook and artwork with possessive pride. Can we get ice cream to celebrate my art show? Her question addressed both adults collectively, unconsciously, establishing them as a unit for decision-making purposes. The moment crystallized the evolving dynamic between them, no longer merely CEO and employee, not quite friends, certainly not family, but occupying an undefined space where Sophie's well-being represented common ground transcending professional boundaries and socio-economic divisions. Ice cream sounds appropriate for an artistic success, Olivia agreed, looking to Robert for confirmation or rejection of this further extension of their interaction. The choice represented more than dessert preferences, it established precedent for future boundary negotiations for Sophie's expectations for their professional relationship. Robert weighed the potential complications against his daughter's hopeful expression, making the calculation that had guided every decision since becoming a single parent, what served Sophie's well-being both immediate and long-term. One scoop, he determined finally. Artists need proper nutrition, even successful ones. Sophie's delighted response sealed the decision, propelling them toward this additional shared experience beyond the carefully defined parameters of their professional connection. As they walked toward their respective vehicles, Robert found himself in unfamiliar territory, navigating not just a corporate landscape, but a personal one, where the boundaries between professional opportunity and human connection blurred with each interaction. The ice cream outing would represent another step across those boundaries, for better or worse. Whether they were building bridges between worlds or dismantling necessary walls remained to be seen. What was certain was that their lives had become irrevocably entangled through Sophie's affection, through professional necessity, and through the unexpected resonance between two people from vastly different circumstances who recognized in each other a shared commitment to creating stability amid uncertainty. In this moment of decision, Robert understood that the greatest challenge wasn't the failing HVAC system or Wilson's corporate machinations. It was determining where professional gratitude ended and personal connection began, and whether that distinction ultimately mattered when both served the priority that had guided him through every hardship, providing Sophie with the foundation to build her own castles, whatever form they might take. The unofficial ice cream celebration marked a turning point in their evolving relationship. 3 weeks later, Robert's implementation of Phase 1 had succeeded beyond projections, stabilizing the critical server environment and generating measurable energy savings. The technical victory should have felt complete, yet, as he prepared for the executive review meeting, a different tension lingered beneath the professional accomplishments. Since the art showcase, Olivia had maintained careful professional distance during business hours, no special treatment, no private conversations beyond what his position required. Yet Sophie had received a professionally bound sketchbook with architectural graph paper delivered to their home address with a simple note of encouragement. The thoughtful gesture existed in the nebulous territory between personal connection and professional mentorship, defying simple categorization. The executive boardroom hummed with anticipation as Robert arranged his presentation materials. Dr. Harrison, the consultant initially hired to support Wilson's replacement plan, had verified Robert's results with grudging professional respect. Even Wilson himself had modified his opposition, shifting from outright obstruction to subtle undermining through technical questions designed to highlight Robert's lack of formal education. The quarterly projections should reflect our infrastructure savings, Wilson noted as executives filtered into the room, his tone superficially collegial. Though I wonder if we've accounted for the maintenance burden of keeping the legacy system operational. Those man-hours represent significant hidden costs. Robert recognized the strategy, reframing his success as a temporary reprieve rather than a sustainable solution. Before he could respond, Frank arrived with supporting documentation, his timing suspiciously perfect. Actually, we've tracked maintenance hours, pre-modification versus post-implementation. Frank announced, distributing a single-page analysis that Robert hadn't prepared. Total maintenance burden reduced by 37% despite increased monitoring frequency. The reinforcement from an unexpected quarter shifted the dynamic subtly, Wilson's isolation becoming more apparent as other executives reviewed the compelling figures. Robert caught Frank's eye with silent gratitude, recognizing the older man's preparation for exactly this line of attack. Olivia entered last, her professional demeanor offering no hint of the informal ice cream outing or the architectural sketchbook. Let's begin with Mr. Thorne's assessment of Phase 1 results and recommendations for Phase 2 implementation. For 20 minutes, Robert presented his findings with technical precision, documenting the system improvements, energy efficiency gains, and cost savings achieved through targeted modifications rather than wholesale replacement. The data spoke for itself: over $400,000 saved in just 3 weeks, with projected annual savings exceeding $2.3 million once all phases were implemented. Dr. Harrison provided independent verification, his academic skepticism gradually yielding to empirical evidence. While I maintain that replacement would offer certain technological advantages, the performance improvements achieved through Mr. Thorne's modifications are impressive. The system stability metrics now exceed industry benchmarks by a significant margin. The grudging endorsement from Wilson's hand-picked expert effectively neutralized the remaining opposition. Board members exchanged satisfied glances, pleased by both the financial savings and the validation of their CEO's unconventional hiring decision. Wilson, sensing defeat, pivoted toward qualified cooperation. These early results are encouraging. Perhaps we should consider accelerating Phase 2 implementation to capitalize on the momentum. The suggestion seemed supportive, but carried hidden implications. Accelerated timelines would strain resources, potentially forcing errors that would justify his original replacement recommendation. Robert recognized the trap, but hesitated to publicly contradict an executive's apparently constructive proposal. "We should maintain the established timeline." Olivia intervened, her business instincts detecting the same danger Robert had identified. "Quality implementation prevents future emergencies. I believe that's a principle Mr. Thorne's team has demonstrated effectively." The subtle acknowledgement of Robert's approach provided professional cover while allowing him to maintain his original implementation schedule. The interaction reflected their developing professional shorthand, Olivia supporting his technical judgment without undermining his authority with the team. As the meeting concluded, board members offered congratulations with newfound respect, no longer viewing Robert as the CEO's charity project, but as a valuable technical asset. The shift in perception manifested in direct questions about other potential system improvements, invitations to contribute to long-term infrastructure planning, and business cards exchanged for future consultation. Wilson departed quickly, his expression carefully neutral despite the strategic defeat. Dr. Harrison lingered, however, approaching Robert with academic curiosity, replacing his initial condescension. "Your modification to the Eastern cooling circuit violates conventional engineering principles, but achieves superior results." The consultant acknowledged professional interest overcoming institutional bias. "Would you consider documenting your methodology? It could provide valuable case study material for practical applications." The invitation to contribute to formal knowledge from someone with academic credentials represented unexpected professional validation. Robert agreed to share his approach, recognizing the potential bridge between practical experience and theoretical education, two worlds that had previously existed in separate spheres. As the boardroom emptied, Olivia remained at the conference table, reviewing notes with focused attention that indicated a momentary opportunity for private conversation. Robert approached with professional purpose, aware of maintaining appropriate boundaries within the corporate environment. "The Phase 2 implementation plan is ready for your review." He began providing necessary business context for the interaction. Olivia looked up, her expression revealing nothing beyond professional interest. "Your team has exceeded projections considerably. The board is impressed not just with the technical solutions, but with the leadership approach you've demonstrated." The acknowledgement carried professional significance, confirming his position had transcended its origins as a chance encounter in a bakery. Frank deserves substantial credit. His institutional knowledge made the rapid implementation possible. "Frank has worked here for 15 years without achieving these results." Olivia countered, her assessment direct but not unkind. "The difference is your approach, practical problem solving, without being constrained by how things have always been done. That perspective has value beyond this specific project. The conversation balanced precariously between professional evaluation and personal connection, neither crossing into inappropriate territory nor remaining entirely within conventional boss-employee parameters. Sophie asked if you might be interested in seeing her new castle designs. Robert ventured, acknowledging the unique relationship that had developed. She's incorporated some of the architectural principles you mentioned at her showcase. Something softened in Olivia's expression, a brief glimpse behind the professional mask. I'd like that. Perhaps the weekend after Phase 2 completion, assuming appropriate boundaries are maintained to avoid complicating your professional position. The deliberate acknowledgement of his previously expressed concern reflected genuine respect for his perspective rather than mere compliance with corporate protocols. This consideration, more than any technical approval or professional advancement, shifted something fundamental in Robert's perception of their evolving connection. Sophie would enjoy that, he confirmed, the simple acknowledgement carrying layered significance they both recognized, but neither needed to articulate. The Phase 2 implementation proceeded with unexpected smoothness, the technical challenges proving less formidable than the interpersonal dynamics as Robert's team expanded to include engineers previously aligned with Wilson's replacement plan. The integration required careful leadership, validating their technical expertise while redirecting their approach toward practical solutions rather than theoretical ideals. Frank continued providing invaluable guidance on navigating corporate politics, his decades of experience offering perspective that transcended hierarchical boundaries. Wilson's backing off publicly because the numbers don't lie, but he's building a different case now, suggesting your approach works for this particular system, but isn't scalable across all facilities. The strategic insight proved accurate as Wilson began championing a company-wide infrastructure review, positioning himself to control larger budgets while isolating Robert's influence to the Phoenix project systems. The corporate maneuvering represented a more sophisticated challenge than direct obstruction, acknowledging Robert's specific success while limiting its broader implications. Sophie thrived amid these professional complexities, her artistic confidence blossoming under the dual encouragement of her father's stability and Olivia's occasional professional insights. Her architectural designs evolved from fantasy castles to more practical structures that incorporated real-world considerations while maintaining childlike imagination. Their home environment reflected the gradual improvement in circumstances, small upgrades appearing incrementally rather than transformative changes. Robert replaced their worn couch with a more comfortable model, installed proper shelving for Sophie's growing collection of art supplies, and began researching neighborhoods with better schools for the following academic year. These measured improvements reflected Robert's cautious approach to their changing fortunes, building sustainable security rather than embracing luxury that could disappear as suddenly as it had arrived. The tempering of expectations reflected hard lessons from previous reversals when Michelle's departure had stripped away their financial stability overnight. The weekend following Phase 2 completion brought Olivia to their apartment for the promised review of Sophie's architectural designs. Her arrival in casual closed jeans and a simple sweater that deliberately understated her wealth represented thoughtful consideration of their environment. Sophie had prepared for the visit with meticulous attention, arranging her drawings in developmental sequence to demonstrate her artistic progression. I started with just castles because they're pretty, but now I'm designing buildings people could actually live in, she explained, professional seriousness overtaking childish excitement. This one has solar panels built into the roof design so they don't look ugly. Olivia examined the drawings with genuine interest, noting specific elements that showed developing technical understanding. You've considered natural light patterns in your window placement. That's advanced thinking. Many professional architects overlook environmental integration in favor of aesthetic impact. Sophie absorbed the feedback with solemn concentration, immediately applying the concepts to her next sketch. The interaction reflected meaningful mentorship rather than superficial praise, establishing a foundation for Sophie's developing self-concept as someone capable of creating rather than merely dreaming. Robert observed their exchange from the kitchen as he prepared coffee, noting the natural rapport that had developed between his daughter and this unlikely figure in their lives. Olivia offered neither condescension nor excessive accommodation, treating Sophie's aspirations with the same seriousness she might give to professional colleagues. As Sophie became absorbed in implementing Olivia's suggestions, the adults retreated to the small kitchen table, the modest setting highlighting the unusual nature of their connection. The conversation began with neutral topics: Sophie's artistic development, the successful system implementation, before gradually approaching the unacknowledged question of what existed between them. Wilson's backing a company-wide infrastructure review, Robert noted, providing professional context for more personal considerations. Frank thinks it's his strategy for isolating the Phoenix Project's success as a special case rather than an approach that could be applied more broadly. Olivia nodded, unsurprised by the political maneuvering. It's a predictable counter-move. The quarterly financial impact of your implementation has attracted board attention, which threatens his position as the infrastructure authority. The observation contained unspoken implications. Robert's technical success had elevated him beyond his initial role into corporate politics he hadn't sought but couldn't avoid. The trajectory carried professional opportunities alongside increasing complications. Sophie seems to be thriving, Olivia noted, changing subjects with deliberate care. Her artistic development shows remarkable progress. The observation opened space for acknowledging the personal impact of their professional connection without explicitly crossing established boundaries. Robert accepted the invitation to more personal territory with matching caution. The stability helps. Knowing we can afford art supplies that we're not one emergency away from disaster, it gives her freedom to think beyond immediate needs. The acknowledgement carried no resentment or excessive gratitude, simply recognition of how their circumstances had changed. Children sense financial insecurity even when we think we're protecting them from it. Olivia agreed, her tone suggesting personal experience rather than theoretical observation. My mother worked 3 jobs after my father left, but still made sure I had what I needed for school projects. I didn't understand the cost of that stability until much later. The shared experience of single-parent households created unexpected common ground, despite their different economic circumstances. Robert recognized that while his struggles existed on a different scale, the fundamental challenge of providing security amid uncertainty transcended financial brackets. Sophie asked about her mother yesterday. He admitted venturing into territory he rarely discussed with anyone. Michelle sends birthday cards sometimes, but hasn't visited in over 2 years. Sophie wanted to know if that means she's not a real family anymore. The disclosure represented significant trust, moving beyond professional courtesy or casual friendship into genuine vulnerability. Olivia received the confidence with corresponding seriousness, her response careful but not detached. What did you tell her? That families come in different forms and that sometimes people can't give what we need from them, but that doesn't change the love that exists. Robert's answer revealed his parenting philosophy: honesty, tempered with age-appropriate understanding, neither sugarcoating reality nor burdening a child with adult complexities. Olivia considered his response with evident approval. That's wise. Children need truth they can build upon, not comforting fiction that collapses later. The conversation paused as Sophie approached with revised drawings incorporating Olivia's suggestions, her expression seeking validation from both adults equally. The moment crystallized their unusual dynamic: not a traditional family structure, but a functioning support system centered around Sophie's well-being. After Sophie returned to her artwork, the adults' conversation gradually shifted toward the undefined territory between their professional relationship and emerging personal connection. Neither pushed explicit boundaries yet, both acknowledged the unique circumstances that had brought their lives into intersection. I should clarify something, Olivia began, maintaining professional composure while addressing personal matters. My initial interest in your technical expertise was entirely professional. The HVAC system controlling the Phoenix project represents a critical business priority. Your ability to implement effective solutions without excessive cost aligned with company objectives. The statement offered necessary reassurance that their professional relationship rested on merit rather than charity or personal interest. Robert appreciated the clarity, which preserved his professional dignity while acknowledging the unusual circumstances of their initial meeting. And now, the question addressed the evolution beyond those initial professional parameters into something less easily categorized. Olivia considered her response carefully. Corporate precision applied to personal terrain. Now I value both your technical contributions to Bennett Technologies and the perspective you bring from outside traditional corporate pathways. Those remain separate from my personal respect for your parenting approach and my interest in Sophie's development. The deliberate separation of professional appreciation from personal connection offered a framework for their evolving relationship neither inappropriately blurred nor artificially restricted by conventional boundaries. Robert recognized the thoughtfulness behind this articulation, which addressed his concerns without diminishing the genuine connection that had developed. Sophie benefits from having diverse influences in her life. He acknowledged offering reciprocal appreciation without excessive personal disclosure. Your perspective on her artistic development provides something I can't offer alone. The mutual recognition of value exchange professional opportunity, balanced with personal enrichment, established equilibrium between them that transcended hierarchical differences without ignoring their existence. This foundation allowed authentic connection while maintaining necessary boundaries. As their conversation continued, Sophie periodically interrupted with questions or observations, her natural inclusion of both adults in her thought process, reflecting her perception of them as a connected unit rather than separate individuals who happen to occupy the same space. When Olivia eventually departed, Sophie's farewell included both a formal handshake, mimicking professional interaction, and an impulsive hug that revealed the emotional connection beneath the playful imitation. The duality perfectly captured their unique relationship, structured yet genuine, respectful of boundaries, while allowing authentic connection. The following weeks brought increasing integration of Robert's practical methodology into broader company operations, his influence extending beyond the Phoenix Project to other infrastructure systems. The expansion occurred not through formal promotion, but through organic recognition of his effectiveness as other department heads sought his input on technical challenges that had resisted conventional solutions. Wilson's response evolved accordingly, shifting from direct opposition to strategic alliance building with board members whose priorities aligned with traditional corporate approaches. The political maneuvering remained largely beyond Robert's direct experience, visible primarily through Frank's ongoing intelligence gathering and occasional strategic guidance from Olivia during their regular system review meetings. The professional momentum built steadily toward the Phase 3 implementation, which would complete the system transformation and establish permanent protocols for ongoing maintenance. The final phase carried heightened significance, not merely technical completion, but validation of Robert's approach against the traditional corporate methodology Wilson had championed. 2 days before the scheduled implementation, an unexpected complication emerged. Critical components required for the final phase were delayed in customs due to administrative errors in the import documentation. The shipping department reported minimum 3-week delays for replacement parts, potentially jeopardizing the entire implementation timeline. Robert received the news during morning status review, immediately recognizing Wilson's fingerprints on the conveniently timed shipping error. The deliberate sabotage aimed to force either project delay, which would undermine confidence in Robert's approach, or rushed implementation with substitute components, which would compromise system performance. Frank confirmed the suspicion through his network of long-term employees. Shipping coordinator says the documentation was correct when it left her desk, but got updated before submission. Can't prove who made the changes, but Wilson's assistant was asking unusual questions about import procedures last week. The situation demanded immediate response, allowing the delay would validate Wilson's narrative about the unreliability of Robert's approach, while proceeding with inadequate components would create the system failure Wilson had predicted all along. Either outcome would undermine months of careful implementation and potentially reverse the professional standing Robert had established. Rather than escalating directly to Olivia, which might appear as running to his protector rather than solving problems independently, Robert assembled his technical team for creative problem solving. The resulting strategy drew on his years of field improvisation, repurposing components from decommissioned systems in other facilities, modifying specifications to accommodate available parts, and creating custom adaptations that would maintain performance standards despite non-standard configurations. The solution required round-the-clock effort from the entire team, with Frank leveraging decades of institutional knowledge to locate equipment in storage facilities across multiple corporate properties. Engineers who had initially viewed Robert with skepticism now worked alongside him with growing respect, recognizing that his practical approach offered flexibility unavailable in textbook solutions. 48 hours of intensive effort produced a viable implementation plan, using entirely on-site resources, eliminating the customs delay while maintaining performance specifications. The achievement represented not just technical problem-solving, but team transformation, as corporate engineers with advanced degrees worked alongside technicians with practical experience, each contributing valuable perspectives to the hybrid solution. The Phase 3 implementation meeting arrived with the tension visible in the executive conference room. Wilson sat with confident expectation, clearly anticipating Robert's admission of delay or compromise. Board members reviewed briefing materials with professional neutrality, while Dr. Harrison maintained academic objectivity that had gradually evolved into genuine curiosity about Robert's unorthodox approach. Olivia entered last, her expression revealing nothing beyond professional interest. "Mr. Thorne, I understand there have been complications with the component shipments. What's the impact on our implementation timeline?" The question opened space for Robert to explain the delay, without losing face, a professional courtesy that acknowledged the circumstances were beyond his control. Instead, he placed a revised implementation plan on the conference table with quiet confidence. "There's no impact on the timeline. We've developed an alternative approach using existing resources that meets all performance specifications. Implementation begins tomorrow as scheduled." Wilson's expression flickered with momentary shock before recovering professional composure. Surely expedited replacements would be more appropriate than jury-rigged solutions for critical infrastructure. The dismissive characterization attempted to reframe Robert's innovative solution as unprofessional corner-cutting rather than resourceful problem-solving. Before he could respond, Dr. Harrison unexpectedly intervened, his academic credibility lending weight to his assessment. "I've reviewed the alternative implementation plan in detail. The approach is unconventional but technically sound, actually superior to the original specification in several aspects. The performance projections indicate potential efficiency improvements beyond our initial targets." The independent validation from Wilson's own expert effectively neutralized the attempted undermining. Board members exchanged impressed glances, recognizing not just the technical solution, but the leadership that had produced it under pressure. "This is precisely why we brought Mr. Thorne on board," Olivia noted with professional satisfaction. Traditional thinking would have accepted the delay as inevitable. His approach transforms obstacles into opportunities for improvement. The observation carried no hint of personal connection, yet acknowledged the fundamental value Robert brought to the organization: practical problem-solving, unconstrained by conventional limitations. The professional validation before the executive team established his position based entirely on merit, independent of his unusual hiring circumstances. Wilson recognized the comprehensive defeat of his strategy, his expression calculating, as he reassessed Robert not as a temporary obstacle, but as an established threat to his own authority. The shift represented both professional victory for Robert and heightened danger, as opposition would likely evolve from tactical obstruction to strategic undermining. The Phase 3 implementation proceeded without further complications, the team's cohesion strengthened by their shared accomplishment in overcoming the parts shortage. Robert's leadership approach, combining technical expertise with respect for each team member's contributions, created an operational unit that transcended traditional hierarchical boundaries. 2 weeks after successful completion with system performance exceeding all projections, Robert received an unexpected calendar invitation, a private meeting with Olivia, scheduled outside normal business hours, located not in her corporate office, but in a neutral conference room away from executive visibility. The unusual timing and location raised immediate questions. Their professional interactions had maintained appropriate boundaries since the weekend visit to review Sophie's architectural designs, with no suggestion of anything beyond normal business relationship. The departure from established patterns carried potential complications that Robert approached with appropriate caution. The conference room's isolation became apparent as Robert arrived at the designated time: no executive assistants monitoring access, no visible security cameras, no witnesses to whatever conversation might occur. Olivia waited alone, her typical corporate attire replaced by casual clothes, suggesting deliberate separation from her CEO role. "Thank you for coming," she began, the formal phrasing at odds with the informal setting. "This conversation needs to happen outside official channels. Wilson has been building a case against you with certain board members." The direct approach eliminated any ambiguity, about the meeting's purpose, professional protection, rather than personal connection. Robert appreciated the clarity which aligned with his own preference for straightforward communication. Frank mentioned increased activity among Wilson's allies. What's the specific concern? He's reframing your entire implementation as a temporary fix rather than a sustainable solution. Claims the system will require complete replacement within 18 months, making your approach more expensive long-term than his original proposal. Olivia's assessment remained professionally detached despite the personal implications for Robert's position. He's suggesting your lack of formal engineering credentials means you've overlooked critical stress factors that will manifest after extended operation. The attack targeted Robert's most visible vulnerability, his practical experience versus formal education, while playing to corporate risk aversion regarding long-term infrastructure investments. The strategy was sophisticated and potentially effective, with board members who understood financial projections better than technical specifications. The empirical data contradicts those projections. Robert noted professional confidence replacing personal concern. The stress testing results demonstrate stability well beyond 18 months. Data doesn't matter if the narrative becomes accepted wisdom. Olivia countered, her business acumen recognizing the political reality beyond technical facts. Wilson is leveraging relationships built over years. His version is spreading through informal channels where it can't be directly challenged with performance metrics. The situation revealed corporate dynamics beyond Robert's previous experience, politics operating beneath visible decision-making, influencing outcomes through perception rather than performance. The realization highlighted the limitations of his practical approach when confronting institutional manipulation. What's the countermove? His question acknowledged her greater experience in corporate strategy while maintaining professional partnership rather than subordinate dependence. Olivia considered the question with strategic precision, assessing options against potential outcomes. We need external validation from sources Wilson can't dismiss. Industry recognition that frames your implementation as innovative best practice rather than temporary workaround. The strategy made immediate sense, elevating Robert's approach beyond internal corporate politics into industry standards that would be more difficult for Wilson to undermine. The implementation required connections and visibility that extended beyond Robert's current professional network. I've nominated your Phoenix project implementation for the National Association of Facilities Engineering Innovation Award. Olivia continued, revealing preparation beyond their current conversation. The judging committee includes several former professors from Wilson's alma mater. Their validation would effectively neutralize his academic credibility argument. The strategic thinking demonstrated both professional support and personal investment in Robert's continued success, protecting the business value he brought to Bennett Technologies, while simultaneously preserving the opportunities that had transformed his and Sophie's lives. There's an awards ceremony next month in Chicago, she added, watching his reaction carefully. Normally, I would attend as CEO to accept on behalf of the company, but in this case, your direct presentation would be more effective in establishing industry credibility. The proposal carried obvious professional advantages alongside practical complications. Sophie's care during his absence, the intimidating prospect of presenting to industry leaders with advanced credentials, the potential for Wilson to create problems during his absence. I need to make arrangements for Sophie. Robert noted practical considerations taking precedence over professional opportunity. The ceremony includes family programming, Olivia replied, anticipating this concern. Many attendees bring children. Sophie would be welcomed, especially given her interest in technical drawing and architecture. The venue is near the Chicago Architecture Center, which offers excellent children's programs. The thoughtful inclusion of Sophie in the professional opportunity reflected understanding of Robert's priorities that transcended conventional business considerations. This integration of personal and professional elements characterized their unique relationship, neither purely business nor inappropriately personal, but a functional balance that acknowledged the whole person beyond job descriptions. I appreciate the nomination. Robert acknowledged genuine gratitude balanced with professional composure. And the consideration for Sophie's involvement. Its practical business strategy, Olivia maintained, preserving the professional framework while acknowledging the personal elements. Your implementation has saved the company millions while protecting critical infrastructure. Defending that success against internal politics serves corporate interests while simultaneously addressing your personal circumstances. The deliberate balance acknowledging personal impact without centering it above business priorities maintained appropriate boundaries while recognizing the human realities beyond corporate structures. This approach characterized their evolving relationship, which defied conventional categorization while functioning effectively across multiple dimensions. As their meeting concluded with practical details about the upcoming award nomination, Robert recognized the distance they had traveled from that first encounter in the bakery, from charity and suspicion to mutual respect and collaborative problem-solving. The transformation reflected not just his professional integration into corporate systems, but Olivia's evolving understanding of value beyond traditional credentials. The following weeks brought intensive preparation for the engineering conference alongside continued system monitoring and documentation. Sophie approached the Chicago trip with enthusiastic planning, researching architectural highlights with the same detailed attention she brought to her drawings. Frank provided ongoing intelligence about Wilson's activities, which had shifted from direct opposition to subtle reputation management, carefully placed comments questioning the long-term viability of Robert's implementation, while positioning himself as the responsible voice of caution against unproven approaches. 3 days before their scheduled departure for Chicago, Robert received an urgent system alert during evening hours: temperature fluctuations in the Phoenix Project server room exceeding normal parameters. The notification came directly to his phone rather than through normal monitoring channels, suggesting potential tampering with the alert system. Robert arrived at the facility within 30 minutes, having arranged emergency childcare with Mrs. Kaminsky. The server room appeared normal upon initial inspection, yet the monitoring systems showed critical temperature variations that should have triggered visible cooling responses. Frank arrived shortly thereafter, his expression grim as he reviewed the system data. Someone's modified the monitoring sensors to report fluctuations that don't exist. The physical equipment is fine, but the control system is responding to phantom temperature spikes. The sabotage was sophisticated, creating false system alerts that would trigger automated responses, potentially causing actual damage through unnecessary cooling adjustments. More concerning was the timing immediately before Robert's departure for the engineering conference, where his implementation would receive industry validation. Wilson, Robert questioned, though the answer seemed obvious. Frank shook his head slowly, uncertainty replacing his usual certainty about internal politics. Doesn't feel like his style. Too technical, too direct. Wilson works through policy and procedure, not system manipulation. The distinction raised concerning possibilities: either Wilson had escalated to direct sabotage, or another player had entered the situation with technical capabilities beyond administrative obstruction. Either scenario represented significant threat to both the Phoenix Project and Robert's professional position. Systematic diagnosis revealed sophisticated tampering that required both technical expertise and system access beyond casual interference. The modification had been implemented through legitimate credentials, leaving minimal forensic evidence beyond timestamp records, showing access during non-standard hours. Robert and Frank worked through the night to restore proper monitoring parameters and implement additional security protocols against future tampering. The immediate crisis resolved without system damage, but the implications lingered. Someone with advanced technical skills and proper authorization had deliberately attempted to create system failure, timed to Robert's highest profile professional opportunity. Dawn brought Olivia to the server room, her appearance suggesting she'd come directly upon receiving their overnight incident report. Her expression combined professional concern with personal worry that transcended corporate interests. The system is secure now. Her question addressed immediate business priorities, while her gaze evaluated Robert's exhausted appearance with more personal concern. We've restored proper monitoring parameters and added security protocols. He confirmed professional focus overriding physical fatigue. The tampering was sophisticated, someone with both technical knowledge and system authorization. The implication hung between them. This level of sabotage moved beyond corporate politics into potentially criminal territory. The timing suggested direct connection to the upcoming conference presentation, raising questions about how widely information had spread about the award nomination. I want full security monitoring on all Phoenix Project systems until we identify the source. Olivia directed corporate authority, replacing personal concern. and we should consider postponing the Chicago trip until we ensure system stability. The suggestion reflected legitimate business priorities, but carried personal implications for both Robert's professional opportunity and Sophie's anticipated experience. The potential postponement represented another victory for whoever had initiated the sabotage, achieving their presumed objective of preventing Robert's industry recognition. Postponing gives them exactly what they want. He countered professional strategy, overcoming personal disappointment. The system is secure now, and Frank can maintain oversight during our absence. Canceling the presentation would only validate the effort to undermine our implementation. The perspective reflected Robert's growing strategic thinking beyond immediate technical problems, recognizing the broader implications within corporate politics and industry positioning. This evolution demonstrated his adaptation to executive considerations beyond the practical solutions that had initially defined his value. Olivia considered his assessment with analytical precision, weighing technical risks against strategic advantages. You're right. Proceeding with the presentation while maintaining enhanced security here provides optimal outcomes for both the system and our broader objectives. The hour carried subtle significance, acknowledging shared purpose beyond hierarchical roles. This collaborative framing characterized their evolving professional relationship, which had developed from initial uncertainty into effective partnership despite their different backgrounds and positions. As preparations resumed for the Chicago presentation, Robert recognized that their unusual connection had created both opportunity and danger. The professional advancement that had transformed their lives and also generated opposition from those threatened by different pathways to success. The sabotage attempt, while concerning, ultimately reinforced what had become increasingly clear throughout their journey: the boundaries between worlds were more permeable than either had initially believed, creating space for connection across differences while simultaneously exposing vulnerabilities that came with bridging separate domains. Sophie's excitement about the upcoming trip remained unclouded by adult complexities. Her architectural research, compiled into a carefully organized notebook alongside drawings inspired by Chicago's famous buildings. Her preparation reflected Robert's influence, practical planning, and attention to detail, while her creative vision showed the expanding horizons that Olivia's involvement had helped nurture. As they finalized arrangements for the journey that would potentially cement Robert's professional credibility beyond Bennett Technologies, he reflected on the distance traveled since that moment in the bakery when pride had nearly prevented him from accepting help. The transformation extended beyond material circumstances into fundamental understanding that strength sometimes meant accepting connection rather than maintaining isolation. That vulnerability could create opportunity rather than exploitation, and that bridges between different worlds could support traffic in both directions. The Phoenix Project systems hummed with efficient precision temperatures, perfectly regulated through practical solutions rather than theoretical ideals. The technical success reflected the broader evolution, finding balance between opposing approaches, creating stability through flexibility rather than rigidity, and recognizing that the most effective systems incorporated diverse elements working in coordinated harmony rather than isolated perfection.